Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, proceedings will resume on questions previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order. Motion to instruct conferees on H.R. 4348. Motion to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3336. And motion to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1038, all by the yeas and nays. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Remaining electronic votes will be conducted as 5-minute votes. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion to instruct on H.R. 4348, offered by the gentleman from West Virginia, Mr. Ray Hall, on which the yeas and nays were ordered. The clerk will redesignate the motion.
Motion to instruct conferees on H.R. 4348, offered by Mr. Ray Hall of West Virginia.
The question is on the motion to instruct. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed vote no. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
This vote would instruct House negotiators to take a certain position when working out the differences between the House and Senate versions of the transportation bill. House Democrats prefer the Senate's 2-year, $109 billion highway bill, while Republican House leaders would like to vote on a 5-year transportation measure, but have not had the votes to move forward on it. President Obama made a few stops at universities yesterday and today, calling on Congress to prevent interest rates on student loans from doubling on July 1st. House Speaker John Boehner held a short news briefing about student loans this afternoon. We're going to watch that during this vote.
By taking money from one of the slush funds into President's health care law. You know, this week the President's traveling the country on the taxpayer's dime, campaigning and trying to invent a fight where there isn't one, and never has been one, on this issue of student loans. We can and will fix the problem without a bunch of campaign-style theatrics. Listen, the rising cost of tuition is a serious one for students. I know this issue well. It took me 7 years to work my way through college and working every job I could get my hands on. And what Washington shouldn't be doing is exploiting the challenges that young Americans face for political gain. And it shouldn't be sticking small businesses with a health care law that's making it more difficult for them to hire workers. Let's fix the problems for young Americans and leave the campaign theatrics for the fall. Yes, sir.
You said that you're not trying to identify, the President's trying to identify, but by going after the health care spending, aren't you exacerbating the problems with it?
Listen, this slush fund has been used to offset other spending and been done so in a bipartisan fashion. It's a reasonable and a responsible way to deal with this problem that the Democrats themselves created 5 years ago.
If this is going to be a one-year extension, aren't you guys just setting yourself up for another fight next year over the same issue?
No, here, let me turn it over.
Yeah, that's exactly the right question. We need to be working towards a long-term solution to this issue, a solution that brings the market into bear. We're looking at the possibility of variable rates, so that this not a political decision every year, every 2 years, or every election year. And so this fix that the Speaker has just outlined, which will extend the current 3.4% rate for 1 year and pay for it without adding $6 billion to the debt or billions of dollars in taxes to small business. This just gives us the room to work for that long-term solution, which we all know that we have to reach, Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate.
Mr. Speaker, Democrats have already criticized the slush fund, saying it's imaginary, make believe, and also said that you guys let these rates jump soon in your budget. Would you address those two lines?
No, listen. The Democrats controlled both houses of the Congress in 2007. They put this into law. I don't know why they put it into law the way they did, but it's been recognized for some time that it was a problem that had to be addressed. The chairman's been working on this for months. But for the president to go out and to campaign on this with taxpayer funds is inventing an issue that just does not exist.
How does it not exist if the budget you guys wrote assume that these rates will go up?
A lot of the things in a budget assumes current law, and current law is current law.
Mr. Speaker, for a moment, Mr. Maxwell of the White House has announced a veto of certain administration policy on the cybersecurity bill. We don't see many bipartisan bills come through here. What's your thought on that? If maybe we're to veto this bill?
We have a bipartisan bill that would address the issue of cyber terrorism. It's a very serious problem that affects not only the government, not only the Department of Defense, but employers of all types. And thousands of jobs are being lost as a result of the cyber terrorism that's going on today. The President wants the government to set the standards and to write the law for what cybersecurity is going to look like. Now, you want to get the American people a little exercised. Put the government in charge of the Internet. There are responsible steps that we can take that will allow the private sector to share information and to learn together about how best to address these challenges. We think this is a much better approach.
Mr. Speaker, you say you leave the campaign until the fall, but by this vote today, are you specifically targeting the youth vote?
Please. This issue is not a partisan issue. It's not that no one here expected that interest rates were going to go up in July. And members on both sides of the aisle recognize that and have been working to resolve it.
Do you have buy-in from the Senate on this funding mechanism?
We work in the United States House of Representatives, and we'll deal with our members. This is prevention and public health slush fund that was put into the bill by one of the senators from Iowa, I believe.
Mr. Speaker, is this also identified in your reconciliation memo that you sent out today, and would you remove it from your reconciliation if it's going to make you student loan?
Well, it depends on how much money is left in this slush fund. Thanks, everybody.
We heard Speaker Boehner mention the 2010 health care law in connection with student loan interest rates. Republican Senator Lamar Alexander talked about a new student loan bill that he's introduced on the Senate floor today. Congressional Quarterly writes that Senator Alexander proposed an alternative that would draw upon money helping fund the new health care law. Mr. Alexander said that would provide the $6 billion that the Congressional Budget Office estimates it would cost to extend the current 3.4% student loan interest rate for 1 year, plus an additional $2 to $3 billion that could be used to help shore up the Pell Grant shortfall expected in the next couple of years. Members are voting on instructing House negotiators to take a certain position when negotiating with their counterparts in the Senate on the highway bill. House Republicans' surface transportation bill is a 90-day extension which includes language instructing the administration to expedite approval of the Keystone oil pipeline. And as we heard in debate today, House Democrats preferred the Senate's two-year, $109 billion highway bill. In addition, to the House and the Senate tomorrow, some of our live coverage, the House Ways and Means Subcommittee will hold a hearing on expiring or expired tax provisions. Members will give their ideas and proposals. That's live at 10 a.m. Eastern. And the House Foreign Affairs Committee will hold a hearing looking at the conflict between Sudan and South Sudan. That's live at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Both of those hearings will be on C-SPAN 3. As this vote continues, some news. The Senate has passed legislation that would allow the U.S. Postal Service to avert immediate bankruptcy. Associated Press writes that under the measure, the Postal Service will get an $11 billion refund of overpayments made to a federal fund to pay down the debt, and also finance buyouts to 100,000 postal employees. At the same time, it would halt the closing of more than 100 mail processing centers, bar any shutdowns of post offices before the November elections, and protect rural post offices for a year. The bill passed in the Senate on a 62 to 37 vote.
nays are 242. The motion is not adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3336 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3336, a bill to ensure the exclusion of small lenders from certain regulations of the Dodd-Frank Act.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
Members are voting now on a measure that would exclude small lenders from certain regulations in the Dodd-Frank law. There's one more vote after this one. Earlier today, the House approved by voice vote legislation that creates a government transparency board. We spoke with a Capitol Hill reporter about it. Andy Medici, a staff writer for the Federal Times, joining us. Congress appears to be moving quickly to limit the amount of money agencies spend on travel and conferences. How does the bill sponsored by Congressman Darrell Issa aim to do that?
Well, the legislation is actually going to cut agency travel budgets by about 20% over 2010 levels for the next 4 or 5 years. It will also limit agency spending on a single conference to $500,000 and place other limits on how agencies can and should put on conferences.
The Senate adopted an amendment on that same topic yesterday during work on a postal service bill. Who was the sponsor of that amendment, and what would that amendment do?
Well, Senator Tom Coburn, from Republican from Oklahoma, he attached an amendment to the postal bill that would also limit agency spending to $500,000 for any one conference, and it would also cut agency spending by 20%. They're very similar. His would require agencies reporting 4 times a year detailed reports on all of their conference spending as well.
Why are these measures coming up now?
Well, a lot of these are gaining new life or in response to recent allegations at the General Services Administration about lavish conference spending. In particular, 2010 conference where GSA spent $822,000 on lavish catering, mind readers, bike building, team exercises, and those sorts of things.
And what's the next step for the Issa bill and the Coburn amendment?
Well, the Coburn amendment is attached to the postal bill. Once the Senate looks at and does pass the postal bill, it will need to be voted on in the House and conference there, and the House bill will need to be taken up in some part in the Senate as well. Once those are both done, they'll just be awaiting the President's signature.
And your publication is called the Federal Times. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, the Federal Times, we're a weekly newspaper. We're part of Gannett. We cover federal agencies and the internal workings of the federal government.
Andy Medici is a staff writer for the Federal Times. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
the nays are 111. Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Bishop, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1038 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 303, H.R. 1038, a bill to authorize the conveyance of 2 small parcels of land within the boundaries of the Coconino National Forest containing private improvements that were developed based upon the reliance of the landowners in an erroneous survey conducted in May 1960.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
The last vote of the day on a measure dealing with some national forest land in Arizona. Tomorrow, the House will take up a few cybersecurity bills on information sharing between the federal government and businesses. Again, a couple of the lives we're covering tomorrow. A House Ways and Means Subcommittee will hold a hearing on expiring or expired tax provisions. Members will give their ideas and proposals. That's at 10 a.m. Eastern. And the House Foreign Affairs Committee will hold a hearing looking at conflict between Sudan and South Sudan. That's at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Both of those hearings will be live on C-SPAN 3.
Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
For what purposes does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to withdraw my name as a co-sponsor to H.R. 3674.
Without objection, so ordered. The House will be in order. Without objection, the Chair appoints the following conferees on H3 H.R. 4348. From the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure.
From the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure for consideration of the House bill, except Section 141, and the Senate amendment, except Sections 1801, 40102, 40201, 40202, 40204, 40205, 40305, 40307, 40309 through 40312, 112-100114 and 100116, and modifications committed to the conference. Mrs. Micah, Young of Alaska, Duncan of Tennessee, Schuster, Mrs. Capito, Mr. Crawford, Ms. Herrera Butler, Mrs. Bouchon, Hannah, Sutherland, Langford, Ribble, Rahal, DeFazio, Costello, Ms. Norton, Mr. Nadler, Ms. Brown of Florida, Mrs. Cummings, Boswell, and Bishop of New York. From the Committee on Energy and Commerce for consideration of Section 142 and Titles 2 and 5 of the House bill, and Sections 1113, 1201, 1202, subtitles B, C, D, and E of Title I of Division C, sections 32701 through 32705, 32710, 32713, 40101, and 40301 of the Senate Amendment and modifications committed to the conference. Messrs. Upton, Whitfield, and Waxman. From the Committee on Natural Resources for consideration of Sections 123, 142, 204, and Titles 3 and 6 of the House Bill, and Section 1116, Subtitles C, F, and G of Title I of Division A, Section 33009, Titles 6 and 7 of Division C, Section 40101, Subtitles A and B of Title I of Division F, and Section 100301 of Senate Amendments and modifications committed to the conference. Messrs. Hastings of Washington, Bishop of Utah, and Markey. From the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology for consideration of Sections 121, 123, 136, and 137 of the House Bill, and Section 1534, Subtitle F of Title I of Division A, Sections 20013, 20014, 20029, 31101, 31103, 31111, 31204, 31504, 32705, 33009, 34008, and Division E of the Senate Amendment and modifications committed to conference. Messrs. Hall, Cravat, and Ms. Eddie Bernice Johnson of Texas. From the Committee on Ways and Means for consideration of Sections 141 and 142 of the House Bill and Sections 1801, 40101, 40102, 40201, 40202, 40204, 40205, 40301 through 40307, 40309 through 40314, 100112 through 100114, and 100116 of the Senate Amendment and modifications committed to the conference. Messrs. Camp, T-Berry, and Blumenauer.
The House will be in order. The Chair will entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purposes does the gentleman from North Dakota seek recognition?
I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In North Dakota, we know jobs come from small business, not from big government. Small business is the backbone of our economy, and it's the engine to get America back to work. Unfortunately, all too often, instead of helping small business, Washington serves as a roadblock to its growth by piling on excessive regulations, imposing burdensome, complex tax code on the job creators. The legislation I'm introducing today, it's known as the Small Business Tax Simplification Act. It will simplify our tax code for small businesses. Instead of being bogged down with complex tax reporting requirements, this bipartisan legislation will allow businesses to use a simplified form of accounting that more closely matches the way small business owners run their businesses. This bill represents common sense change that would ease the burden of tax complexity for many small businesses, as they can spend more of their time and resources doing what they do best, and that's growing jobs and helping our economy. Thank you, and I yield the remainder of my time.
Are there further requests for 1-minute speeches? Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5th, 2011, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Reed, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader. Under the Speaker's...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise tonight and joined here this evening with 6 of my colleagues or more from the freshman class to talk about a very important issue that we face in this nation, and that is the need for our country to engage in an open and honest debate about comprehensive tax reform as we come to the end of the year with the expiration of our individual tax rates, our corporate tax rates, the potential exposure of the estate tax being initiated at levels that would decimate family farmers, families across all of America. And I am pleased to be joined by so many of my colleagues who understand the importance and the critical nature of this issue to put us on a path to make America competitive when it comes to the world economy, and also to come up with a tax code that is simpler, easier for people to understand, and that we don't have to spend thousands of dollars, hundreds of dollars, paying advisors to fill out forms just to meet the obligation of the tax burden that is out of control because of spending that is completely causing this nation to create a national debt of $15.6 trillion. And as we go forward in this conversation, let us be open and honest and fair about the issues before us. And with that, I would like to yield, Mr. Speaker, to a good friend of mine from Georgia. Sir.
Thank you. And I'll tell you, the key to this is open and honest debate. And we hear a lot from the President, from Democrats today, about America's millionaires not paying their fair share. And they quite honestly quote Warren Buffett and talk about the Buffett rule. And certainly I'm happy Mr. Buffett lives in a country like I do where he's able to achieve what he was. But Warren Buffett is a billionaire, not a millionaire. Now let's talk about, who America's millionaires are. In my part of the country, farmland sells for about $3,500 an acre. So if you own 285 acres of land that you farm, you're a millionaire. In other parts of the country, it may sell for as much as $15,000 an acre, and if you're a farm family with 66 acres, that's one of America's millionaires. These are hardworking, middle-income Americans who've saved all their lives to pay for the farm. We need to work to protect these family farms so that the next generation can carry on their legacy. We hear a lot about that, protecting the American farmer from the other side of the aisle, yet they propose tax policies that do the exact opposite and very much would destroy our agricultural industry and the safety net that it provides in this country. In fact, if you follow their tax policy, America's farmers will simply be another statistic. What statistic? As it stands today, approximately 30% of family businesses will be passed on to the family's second generation, only in America. 12% will make it to the third generation, and only 3% of all family businesses make it to the fourth generation or beyond. For a family farmer, for a small business owner, that's very disheartening. However, if the President has his way, those percentages will be even lower. On January 1st, 2013, the death tax will rise from the dead again, reordained by President Obama and returned with a rate of as much as 55%. Again, in my part of the country, a middle-income family farmer in my part of the country who owns more than 285 acres of land could be assessed a death tax of as much as 55% of what they try to leave to the next generation. That's what the President defines as the family farmer's fair share. Mr. Speaker, family farms are a significant, reliable food source for our country and the world, and they play a vital role in our nation's national security. However, under the President's death tax proposal, family farmers would be forced to downsize their operations, chunk by chunk, selling their assets to pay for what amounts to nothing other than the seizure of the family farm. Many may shut down and have to sell everything just to cover the cost. I think of the song by Crosby, Stills and Nash that said, "Tax the rich to feed the poor till there are no rich no more." This is certainly the attitude of the current administration. And the truth is, you simply can't feed the hungry without the family farmer. They play a vital role in everything we are and do as Americans. Mr. Speaker, you want more hungry people in America? You want a decline in family businesses and higher unemployment? Follow the President's proposal on the death tax, because that's exactly where it leads. It's the seizure of assets of the family farmers and the family businesses in America. And I promise you, if that happens, there will be more hungry people in America.
I so appreciate my colleague from Georgia, the president of the freshman class, Mr. Scott, for his comments on the family farm and standing up for family farmers all across America. You know, one thing that we're going to face at the end of the year with the expiration of these tax rates and a need for us to commit firmly to comprehensive tax reform, I hope we all adopt a policy that I have heard from folks throughout my district, across my state, great state of New York, and across this entire nation, and that is a firm commitment that they're looking for from Washington, D.C. to adopt tax policy that is going to be certain, that we adopt tax policy that is going to be permanent. Because as we ask our local manufacturers, our job creators of the United States of America, they need to know that when they make these decisions on millions, if not billions of dollars in local plants to put people back to work, that the rules of the road are going to be clear, and they are going to be certain, and they are going to be permanent, so that they can rely on that certainty, so that they can make the investment necessary to get this economy going forward again, and making sure that they can rely on those rules and that they won't change midstream, as we see with tax policy that extends on 10-year windows, or tax extenders, the 101 tax extender policies that either expired last year at the end of 2011 or will expire at the end of 2012. Things such as basic as the research and development tax credit for our manufacturers across America. Those types of policies need to be done on a permanent nature, so that when these investment decisions are made, the people that are making those choices know that there will be a forum and a platform on the American market that is secure, certain, and will allow them to make sure that there's a good thought process put in place as they make those investment decisions. And at this point in time, I would love to yield to my good friend from the state of Pennsylvania, one of our leaders in the freshman class, Mike Kelly.
I'd like to thank my friend, Mr. Reed from New York. And Mr. Speaker, I rise today to talk about the things that are certain in life. And people always say there's two things you can be certain of. One is death and the other is taxes. There's another one we're going to be certain of after January 1st, and that is you're going to continue to pay taxes after death. In a government that spends borrows 42 cents of every dollar it spends, it comes as no surprise that we can't even let the dead relax. They're still going to be taxed beyond what they ever could have possibly imagined in real life. So we look at a country that now has the highest corporate tax in the industrial world. We're going to have the highest, or the second highest, death tax in the world. And why? Because of a town that's never learned to do what it tells all of its citizens to do. Live within your means, play fair, pay your fair share. Well, I would just suggest to you that in addition to that, we're telling people is, look, you don't have the certainty anymore that you have planned your estate the right way. Because after January 1st, this government is going to come up with heavier taxes on its citizens. Not the ones that are on the ground and living, but the ones that have already died, that have paid their fair share, that have played within the rules, that have done everything they're supposed to do as good citizens of this great country. And they're going to be told at the end of their life that you cannot go to your final resting place in peace. No. Everything that you have accumulated in your life and already paid taxes on is going to be taxed again. And who is it that's going to face that burden? All those people that we tried to work so hard for, that we tried to put things aside for, our children and our grandchildren, are facing a hockey stick of spending that goes up and off the charts. Again, a country that cannot live within its own means, and yet an administration that tells its citizenry, you have to pay your fair share. The rich are not paying their fair share. Listen, farms are not only going to go away because those assets are going to have to be liquidated to pay death taxes. Small businesses are also going to be harmed by this new tax. They're going to have to liquidate in order to pay the estate taxes that are left over after somebody has worked their whole life, paid their fair share, done what they're supposed to do, live within their means. But that's not enough. That's not enough for this administration. They will continue to rip off from your pockets after death that which you have worked so hard to earn over your lifetime. There's nothing more prickly, not even the sharpest cactus in the desert has more prickly pins on it than this law and this rule and the way it's coming. So I would just say to all my friends, if it's really about being fair, if it's really about playing by the rules, if it's really about a stewardship where you take what is given to you and you pass it on to the next generation in better shape than you got it, my goodness, how have we strayed so far from a basic American principle as that? How have we strayed so far as to tell those who have worked so hard in their lifetime that even in their death they cannot rest? They cannot be assured of that of which they worked so hard in order to pass on to the next generation is going to be vulnerable. 55% tax on your estate. The liquidation of family farms, the liquidation of family businesses, the liquidation of the dreams of our children and grandchildren, all of them go up in smoke as this tsunami of tax increases that this administration will be forcing on the American people after January 1st. So I thank my friend from New York for bringing this issue up, and I yield back the time. Thank you, sir.
Well, I thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania for joining us here tonight. And in listening to your comments, I wholeheartedly agree that what we're seeing at the end of this year